Hello, NCA, and hello, Class Disparities panel. My name is Charisse Laprie, and I am an associate professor at the SI Newhouse School for Public Communications at Syracuse University. I teach the required diversity class at Newhouse. Specifically, it's entitled Race and Gender and Media, but we talk about race, we talk about gender, we talk about sexuality, we talk about ability, and we start all of those conversations with class and socioeconomic status. Class and socioeconomic status is usually a category that is dismissed in our larger conversations, but as I hope to convey to you today, class and socioeconomic status, that is your ability to access, acquire, and ultimately amass resources deeply impacts every other social category. I've made available a 15-minute section of my asynchronous lecture on socioeconomic status, class, and classism. It's also available at my website, CharisseLaprie.me. Specifically, it is a section critically analyzing the iconic scenes from 1990s Pretty Woman, where Julia Roberts accesses money because of her relationship with Richard Gere's Edward, but is unable to bypass the stereotypes of other people in order to achieve the trappings, appearance, and behavior associated with an upper class. I like to point out how overtly we come to dislike the people who are discriminating against Vivian Julia Roberts because of their classism. But at the same time, we as viewers are encouraged to like and respect Vivian Julia Roberts more as she begins to achieve class. I also have a new book coming out on satire and diversity, specifically when desire to disrupt stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination, and when does media framed as satire actually reinforce those issues? I'd like to read a quick segment of that book now that specifically talks about how class, socioeconomic status is connected to specifically gender and race. This section is called The Intersectionality of the Self-Made Man. Americans champion the idea of the self-made man who, quote, acquires whatever wealth they possess by patient and diligent labor. Henry Clay, 1832. In capitalist societies like the United States, individual value is associated with resources, including land, money, and commodities. Attaining wealth is effectively synonymous with attaining social value. However, this idea of the self-made man, and they are nearly almost always men, is ironic because their success has historically relied on the unpaid labor of others. Since its inception, the United States has always been a land of opportunity for some at the expense of others, because land-owning white men were the only individuals able to profit from their own labor in the United States for a very long period of time. Women were restricted from owning property, pursuing higher education, and following the vast majority of career paths. Instead, they were expected to do the unpaid domestic labor that was required to maintain the home for their men who worked outside the home to amass wealth, that is, the breadwinner, effectively supporting the dreams of their husbands and children. As Nora Ephron explained during a commencement address at Wellesley University in 1996, we weren't meant to have futures, we were meant to marry them. We weren't meant to have politics or careers that mattered, or opinions or lives. We were meant to marry them. End quote. Women who were expected to work, that is, working class or lower class women, women of color, were then employed to do domestic labor in other people's homes and often paid less than men who could work outside the home, both their home and others' homes. Ultimately, the American dream of elevating one's socioeconomic status for women was only available through marriage and becoming a dutiful housewife. In 2018, 1 year into the current wave of the Me Too movement, Connie Britton wore a sweater to the Golden Globes with the statement, "Poverty is sexist." Many sought to dismiss her claims by applying the common adage that poverty doesn't discriminate. However, I argue that a phenomena should be considered sexist if it reinforces disparities based on sex and gender. Her sweater was satirical because it drew attention to the absurdity of socioeconomic situation of women around the world. The impact of this satirical artifact was especially pronounced because it was worn at such a prominent and elegant event where most women wear designer gowns. In response, Britain wrote in Entertainment Weekly in 2018, "Here's what I mean." Quote, 130 million girls around the world are denied an education. Women in developing countries account for less than half of all students enrolled in lower secondary school. In 18 countries, a man is legally empowered to prevent his wife from doing a job of which he does not approve. And women in low-income countries have less access to financial institutions and the internet than men. In Africa, nearly 3 out of 4 new HIV infections are in adolescent girls. So women around the world are deeply entrenched in the effects of poverty, and they have fewer opportunities to escape. In other words, poverty is sexist. Similarly, racial discrimination was fueled by limiting opportunities and resources for certain groups. European settlers in the 16th century occupied land originally inhabited by indigenous peoples and killed approximately 56 million people across North, South, and Central America for access to their resources. As colonists began to establish communities and take advantage of this land through the 17th and 18th centuries, hundreds of thousands of enslaved Africans were brought to the United States to labor as chattel property, forced to work without pay because they did not own their bodies or their own labor. Similarly, as colonists began to go west in the 19th century to take advantage of the frontier, indigenous Americans were forced off of their land, their primary means of capital and resource, to make room for white Americans to homestead and create wealth. Asian migrants were responsible for building much of the infrastructure in the westward migration, even as they were refused access to citizenship and property. The opportunity to amass resources while systematically removing the opportunities of others to do the same undermines the American narrative of the self-made man. This image was created by Matthew Tafoya, a member of the Navajo Nation. He created it in the wake of September 11, 2001 attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, which sparked, quote, Homeland Security initiatives. It points to the paradoxical nature of the American dream, for whom the land has been promised and from whom it needs to be protected. The photograph from 1886 features Geronimo and fellow members of the Bedonkohe band of the Apache people. Still a household name, Geronimo, along with other members of the Apache Nation, fought against Mexican and United States military campaigns attempting to occupy native lands. The Bedonkohe band served to secure their homeland against invading terrorists, a story that took on greater significance for Tafoya after 9/11, who recalled thinking, quote, now they know how it feels. It is clear that the rhetoric of the American dream conflicts with the reality of social advancement, undermining the narrative of socioeconomic status and class in the United States. This book, Satire and Diversity, Laughing at Processes of Marginalization, will be available in 2022 from Wiley. It's a diversity textbook which focuses on explaining processes of marginalization that features pretty much all satirical examples and unpacks those examples for how they effectively or ineffectively disrupt discourse related to stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. Thank you for allowing me to appear virtually. Again, I apologize for not being able to engage in robust real-time conversations with all of you. Thank you to Professor Guzman for putting this all together. And I look forward to continuing these conversations in New Orleans in 2022, because I'm pretty certain we're not going to solve it before then. Thank you. Stay safe.